No. So one of the common things that we're seeing in all of these trash receptacles is food waste or packaging waste. This is in Little Italy in the streets of New York. This is in Jordan. Those black things flying around are actually plastic carrier bags, plastic grocery store bags, if you will. More food waste there. Oops, missed one. That is near the Statue of Liberty in New York. Looks like perfectly good bananas just gone to waste. More water bottles. This is again in New York City, outside of McDonald's. Packaging waste, coffee cups, plastic silverware, condiment packaging. This is in a plane. And look, I'm not eating the dessert or the roll there, so that's wasted food as well as the wasted packaging. More airplane waste. This is in an airport, just trash strewn about. Another near the Statue of Liberty. This is in an airport. So I think that the evidence is out there. I think we can all agree that there's a big problem. And what is that problem? Well, it's several problems, actually. The first problem is that there is food waste, the actual waste of food and drink products themselves. And, just don't take it from me or the photos I've shown you. A lot of the data are saying the exact same thing, that there is a lot of food that is grown and processed but is wasted. So in the United States, at least, about 20 to 40% of all food that's grown and processed is wasted. When you think about that, I mean, between a fifth and almost one half of food that's produced is wasted. That is just tremendous. And look at residential. It's amazing to see how much food is wasted there. Oregon Public Broadcasting, which is a PBS public broadcasting channel, featured a report from the UN saying very similar data that the world is wasting 1/4 of its food. And who are we to argue with the United Nations, right? Here's another way to look at it. Food waste is indeed a global problem, but here we're seeing that the food waste actually varies by region. So, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, the kind of waste that happens is more in handling and storage or in food production, whereas in North America, industrialized Asia, and Europe, the food waste is mostly in the consumption. So no matter how you look at it in the food supply chain, food is still being wasted in a tremendous amount. This I thought was an interesting graphic. This is from the United Nations as well, showing something similar in terms of food lost, which was food intended for human consumption but wasted during production or the distribution. And the orange circles are food waste that was discarded by consumers. So you can see that consumers are wasting very little food in Africa and Latin America and the Middle East, but they're wasting a tremendous amount of food in Asia, Europe, and North America. Now, one of the things that I pay attention to a lot is the waste of food on airlines. And when you think about, all those bread rolls that aren't eaten or all of the little trays that the food gets served in, that's a lot of waste every day. So imagine an airline flying 50,000 flights with 250 passengers per flight. That's potentially 12.5 million meals that are served. And when you think about all of that extra waste that is being generated from that, it's just mind-boggling. Now, there are some airlines that have been taking an effort to curb this in both food waste as well as packaging waste. I can tell you that Alaska Airlines in the United States has a very, very active recycling program, and they pretty much recycle everything that comes onto the plane. Lufthansa has done something interesting with their Discover Slow Food service, but that is only a business class product, so that only affects a very small percentage of their customers. I think that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity still in the airline industry to really look at and hone in on that food waste. If people aren't eating the bread rolls, stop serving them or serve a different kind of product, for example. And I think that we see another kind of waste in cruise lines as well. And this is something that has made the news quite a lot over the years. You hear stories about cruise lines throwing huge garbage bags of trash out into the ocean. You hear about garbage washing up on shores of nearby islands. It's all true. I've worked for a cruise line, and I've seen firsthand trash being dumped into the ocean in the middle of the night. It's really kind of devastating. Now, one cruise line believes that the problem is under control, and I think that cruise lines have done a lot in the past 10 or 15 years to improve the situation, but I think they have a long way to go. And I would like to ask, how much do the passengers even know about these food waste and packaging waste reduction programs? I think if people knew that they were wasting so much food, or that there were programs to recycle, they might think twice. I think one of the problems in cruise lines too is this tradition of kind of all-you-can-eat free food. And I've seen people order food to their cabin and just order a whole pizza, and they don't eat it, and they just stick it out in the hallway because they can. The cruise lines now are starting to charge for some meal services, and they're being positioned as kind of a premium option that people can pay extra for, and presumably the food quality or service or experience is better. That's one way to curb food waste and also bring in additional revenue for the cruise line. But I think that, it's really hard to get a handle on this notion of food waste because it varies really around the world. I mean, what you are doing in your jurisdiction or your how you were brought up, or whether you were taught to recycle, varies all over the world. So even in the United States, we have 50 different states, but I like to say we have 50 different countries because, it's like here, 20 states restrict stores from selling products after these dates, 30 states don't. How do you get your head around that? How do you know what to do? How do you know what's safe? How do you know how you should be behaving as a consumer? And that's just one country. Look at all of the EU. Look at all of the Asian countries, and presumably countries next to each other trade a lot with each other. So you would think that this has been kind of worked out better, but there's really a long way to go, even in integrated markets like the United States or the EU. There are certain stores that are taking this notion of waste and doing something about it. Now, this isn't from a travel perspective. This is from a consumer perspective. But there's a store in Germany called Unverpackt, which is German for basically unpackaged, and they're selling food in bulk. The idea is that you bring your own packaging, so whether it's plastic containers or bags or whatever, and you fill them up yourself. And that is one step to curbing this problem. You'll see things too about people bringing their own water bottles, for instance. We have later a woman joining us from Travelers Against Plastic, and she is a guest speaker today, and she will be giving her perspective on what's happening with the water bottle waste. And steps are being taken, and we're moving in the right direction, but this is not going to be a solution that's fixed by December 31st of this year. So what can we do as consumers and as travelers? I think the first thing is to look at our own behavior as travelers. So this notion of smaller portions, tapas, which is very big and popular right now, those are smaller portions. And if you look at the obesity epidemic, people are starting to realize that maybe those, massive main course size plates that people get, the United States has been famous for overfeeding locals, visitors, everybody. And, to be fair, when you're traveling in the South and there's a big plate of barbecue with, coleslaw, barbecued beans, onion rings, hush puppies, you got to eat it all. You really do. But, this notion of smaller portions, this is the trend. This is where people are going. They're realizing that maybe we don't need to be eating as much food. And when you think about it, 2 or 3 or 4 plates of tapas and you're full. Have a little bit of wine with that, and there you go. I think also reducing consumption by just simply buying less so there's no waste to begin with, and saying no to unwanted food. I was talking about the airlines with their bread rolls, or the same with restaurants where they automatically put bread on the table. In Italy and Greece and places in the Mediterranean, they charge a cover. They call it a cover, and for like €1 or €2 a person, you're supposed to get bread to the table. So that's part of the culture and the tradition there, and that's fine. But what happens if someone doesn't want that? They're gluten intolerant, for instance, or they just don't like bread, or they'd rather have something else. Should they be forced to pay that €1 or €2 and still have the bread on the table, even if they don't want it or can't eat it? And I think that this really goes back to educating our kids growing up, helping kids to realize that, if you can't eat it, then just put it back or don't take it in the first place. We talk sometimes about our stomachs, our eyes being larger than our stomachs, and I think that's true. And I think that we're also kind of forgetting how to cook. It's so easy to buy food out, especially in big cities like New York or London, and that's part of the culture, is eating out a lot. But I think that when we kind of remember how to cook food at home, it not only is the food healthier, but it also helps us to save money. And for those of you who attended the previous session with Evelyn White from Book a Local, that's what their entire business model is built on, basically, is experiencing meals and food like a local, with locals in their homes many of the times. And that's a trend that we identified in our 2015 Food Trekking Monitor report. So I think that when we travel, let's try that peer-to-peer dining, like the Book a Local website, and get to know travelers and experiencing the local culture. There's no reason why someone needs to visit a chain coffee store or a chain burger shop while they're traveling. I can get Starbucks anywhere in the world. I can get McDonald's or Burger King anywhere in the world, so I'm not going to travel for Starbucks. Save the big chain dining for the airports on the way home. And just say no to the nice to have or unnecessary things. If someone puts the waiter's bringing a straw and you don't need a straw for your drink, just say stop. I don't need that, or a plastic lid for the coffee cup. I think that another area where I've identified where I used to have a lot of food waste was I would purchase food and bring it with you on the plane or whatever it is, and then you've got all that extra packaging waste. I mean, I couldn't believe they give you 10 napkins or serviettes, 10 packages of ketchup or tomato sauce, maybe some mustard, a handful of salt and pepper, and I don't need all that. And so I was looking at all the waste that I generated from one meal, and I couldn't believe it. So instead, what I do now is I bring nuts or dried fruit or granola or chocolate with me in the airplanes and at airports, and I'll have that. And that's stuff that's portable, it's non-perishable, and I'm not generating all of that waste from another meal in an airport. And I think that one of the things that I like to do is ask questions, and sometimes people don't even think about the amount of food that they're wasting. They might be younger and less experienced in the world, and this is just a job to them, working in the restaurant, or it's just recycling isn't part of the culture. But ask questions, and I think the more that we communicate and ask questions of people, the more we get them thinking as well, and hopefully we'll drive change over time. Now, that's food waste. Now, there's also packaging waste. That's the waste that is generated by what the food is put in for takeaway. And I think that, responsible can still be affordable. We do an event in Portland every February called FoodTreX, and we chose to use Bioware, which is made of compostable plastics made from, I think, corn. And that goes to a commercial facility where it is biodegradable, and they process it there. But that was 1/4 of the cost of metal utensils and glassware. And, I wanted to just, common sense in the industry we work in and what we stand for says that we should just use knives and forks, metal knives and forks and glassware, but the price was 4 times as much. That doesn't make sense to me. If anything, because it's reused each time, that should cost less. But at least we were able to make a responsible choice that was not expensive and helped to keep the registration costs down. The worst offender, of course, would be using just regular plastic or styrofoam and throwing that in the garbage. Here's a survey that was done online, and basically asking different food and drink food service companies what kind of packaging they would prefer to have. And what it boiled down to was business owners would pay a little bit more for a domestically made product that was also responsible. So you can see here, like the last one, domestic materials, renewable source, non-recyclable, and compostable, that they would pay a slight premium on that for the ability to offer that kind of packaging. So they're trending in the right direction. I'm also seeing things trend in the right direction as well. Chris McKay is going to be talking about travelers and water bottles, but here you're seeing this is in a lesser developed nation where they're starting to take the initiative and to recycle what they can. And then on the left there is a fountain where people can refill their water bottles in airports, and I think that's brilliant. And that's a great example of encouraging people to use less packaging, less plastic. There are solutions out there that exist that can actually replace the naughty kind of plastic. PLA is one, and it's suitable in a lot of situations, but it doesn't work in some situations. For example, it can be slightly permeable to flavors and aromas. So if a food product is sensitive to that, that's probably not going to work in that kind of situation. But the nice thing is this kind of plastic is made from corn or sugarcane. Now then that, of course, begets the question, well, if we're raising all this corn or all this sugarcane so that we can have more plastic, is that just as bad? And I would say the best policy is to reduce consumption first before going down the recycling route. You know, do you really need to put your product in a package, or can it just be put in a ceramic bowl, for instance? You remember that slide I showed earlier on about the little plastic ramekins that came with sauces in them, and each time we wanted another sauce, it came in a plastic ramekin, and there were about 8 different plastic ramekins on the table. That's ridiculous. You know, just use the ceramic ramekins or hard plastic and put them in the dishwasher. So there are plenty of companies out there that are offering a wide variety of biodegradable and compostable food packaging, and in a lot of different countries as well. Green packaging vendors do exist, but business owners, I think, need some help with making the right decisions, with knowing that there are options out there. And so if we can work to help get them the information they need to make sound business decisions, then that's part of that having that conversation that I talked about before that's so important. Here's a company out of South Africa doing a similar kind of thing. So as I said, it is happening all over the planet. It's just happening slowly. Here's another example of a company. So why is adoption for these renewable resources not happening faster? Why are we not using biodegradable plastics more, for instance? And I think it goes back to what I was saying before about requiring a change in behavior. You know, we need to be instilled from an early age that we should just not be consuming as much in the first place. That's the first step. And I think that, you know, we business owners have, you know, they've got a process in place. You know, they have a supplier for their plastic lids for their coffee or their coffee stirrers or something, whatever. And you know, it's a pain to have to change. You know, you have to find a new vendor. Can the vendor meet your price point? Can they deliver the supplies that you need? Are they reliable? Are they trustworthy? You know, do they, you know, the pricing terms and so on. Those are all things that have to be thought about. And some business owners would rather just keep the status quo as is. It's easier to not do anything. But I think that, like in that survey you saw, people are realizing that they're needing to do something more. So the next issue, I think, in terms of adoption is really the logistics. You know, these kinds of products are not available in a lot of markets, or they might be very expensive because they're a brand new product somewhere. So that may be a limited barrier to entry, limiting the entry into a market because of that. You could also have a very low technical knowledge of these kinds of resources in a market. So in a small country like New Zealand, or, well, we saw South Africa, which was already doing something that was great, but let's take, you know, Ecuador or Peru or or Guatemala or Puerto Rico. These destinations may not have enough access to a bigger market, for instance, that's driving these kind of innovative changes, and it may take longer for those changes to filter down in places like that. And again, it's reorganizing the company's internal and external supply chains. That takes effort and thought and cost and preparation and training, and sometimes that's an extra thing that a business doesn't want to have to worry about. There's also a perceived cost that doing the right thing or purchasing sustainably is more expensive, and that's not always the case. We have proven in the research we've done that many of these options are the same price or even cheaper now than regular plastic. So remember, real plastic is made from oil, and when the price of oil is high, plastic is expensive. So anyway, something to think about. There's also, in companies that are publicly traded, there's this notion of decreasing shareholder dividends, where if we go for a new kind of packaging that costs 5 cents more per unit, over the year we're going to spend $50,000 more in packaging. That's less profit that the shareholders can take away. I think that we need to just put that aside and say, hey, turn it into a PR triumph and say, look, we've made the decision as a company to get behind biodegradable and compostable packaging. We know it's the right thing to do for our planet. Our customers have been asking us, and we're happy to embrace it. Then watch and see what happens to the price of that company's stock. Okay, and then I think there's too much noise in the marketplace. I mean, there's a lot of competition for everything. There's just so much activity and marketing messages. The radio, the satellite, text messages coming in. You're getting emails on your phone. It's confusing, and just to throw in this notion of, hey, we need to find a new takeout carrier vendor today. People are busy, and it's just one more thing to think about. So I think that this is one of those things that needs to rise to the top. Unfortunately, it's pretty important. So to summarize, it is a global problem. We know that these kinds of responsible packaging items exist. We know that there is a regular availability of these kinds of solutions. We know that these solutions can be slow to enter the supply chain in certain markets. And we know that misleading labels can cause the disposing of edible food, like in the packaging I showed with the milk carton before. So a lot of edible food is actually being thrown away because people think it is passed by the use date. In the UK, they have a use-by date on their packaged goods, and in the US, it's a sell-by date usually. And so people see a sell-by date, they think, oh, it's spoiled, but you might have another week or two of viable product left. But in the UK, you know that you really should use the product by that date, and then it's probably going to have gone off after that. There's also the perception of a higher cost, so that needs to be factored in. And I think really, change happens when there's more education and when the consumers demand it more. So let's have those conversations when we're in meetings with colleagues, out at lunches or dinners with colleagues, when we're traveling in other countries as well. Let's help spread our knowledge and our concern around the world. And I think, just doing more thinking, thinking before we act. Like I sat there in that airplane with my meal with the 10 ketchup packages and the 10 napkins and 3 sets of, how they have the fork and the knife and the spoon and little plastic wrapping with a napkin inside. I had 3 of those and a handful of pepper and salt. And it made me think. It made me say, this is ridiculous. I caused this. I was responsible for this. And that was the end of that. And I think I'd like to suggest that we move from the word sustainability to responsibility, because I think sustainability implies that the status quo is okay and that everything is fine. And I think that really we need to start thinking more about responsibility and what we need to do to take responsibility for our own actions and also to enable our visitors and customers to be responsible. I try to take my behavior on the road with me with regard to recycling, and sometimes I'll go to other countries and I'll say, do you have recycling? And they just look at me like I was, the son of Frankenstein or something. They just can't understand why I would even care about that. And again, it starts at home, I think, from an early age and in schools as well, helping our kids to understand the value of being a responsible global citizen. and I just threw this in for fun. This is one of my pet peeves. This drives me crazy. The notion of this trash can that has a plastic lining in it, and usually what you'll see, someone will put one Kleenex in, or your luggage tag, from checking your bag, and then the maid in the hotel room takes this entire plastic bag and throws that away, and then does the same thing again the next day. It drives me crazy. Let's see here. So to help your journey, I put some resources on the screen here that I think would be of interest to you. Number 4 is Travelers Against Plastic, and I'll introduce Chris in just a minute. We just recently forged a strategic partnership with Travelers Against Plastic. They're based in Seattle. We're based in Portland. It's a short trip for us, and Chris and I are trying to find a time that we can get together and meet. But more importantly, we realized there's a way to work together, that we're all about food and drink, and Chris is all about preserving that experience and keeping people away from the plastic. So with that, I think I'd like to turn things over to Chris. And Chris, let me pass this over to you. And can you try speaking, Chris?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. Wonderful. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you. I wasn't sure, is my slideshow queued up, or is that what I do?
I don't have a slideshow for you. Did you send one?
I did. I sent it a couple times, but I just wondered if it was too big. I did see something earlier that said I could download a slideshow, and I'm wondering where PPT notes? No, maybe.
Okay. I didn't receive that, but Chris, what you can do is go into the top where it says share, and then choose file.
All right. From my computer. Excellent. Let's see here. All right, as that's queuing up, and hopefully it is, we will, I'd just like to introduce myself briefly and let you know what I've been doing. So I have a nonprofit called Crooked Trails, and we run trips around the world, doing it for about 16 years. Our focus is community-based tourism, meaning we'd like to have tourism be in the hands of those who are affected by it and that they actually have control over it. So we kind of offer something like a mini Peace Corps experience, if you will, that people actually get to live and hang out in communities. So over the last 16 years, we've required that anybody traveling with us be prepared to clean their own water, because we don't want to leave a trail of plastic water bottles behind us everywhere we go. So about 2 years ago, my business partner and I decided we should get other people on board. I mean, we really should. I get so tired of seeing just garbage, plastic waste everywhere I go. And I know that most travelers aren't interested in leaving a trail behind them. They just don't know that there's an alternative. There's a huge movement in the United States right now to get people weaned off their disposable plastic water bottles. In fact, San Francisco even banned the sale of plastic water bottles. So there is a big effort. But even people who are very conscientious locally in trying to avoid plastics, when they go abroad, it doesn't even occur to them that there's an option. They just assume, I can't drink the water while traveling, therefore I have to buy plastic water bottles. And that's actually not the case. And that's what Travelers Against Plastic is all about, is encouraging people and showing people and demonstrating how easy it is to actually clean your own water, that it's safer, it's cheaper, and it's better for the environment. So let's see. I downloaded that thing. Now I'm wondering if it's not going to share. I've got my own. I wonder if I can share that.
If you did you go share file and then from my computer?
I did hit, okay, from my computer, so hopefully it downloaded it. Okay, maybe. Let's begin. If your presentation, there's no. All right, let's see if it's going to download now.
Yeah, just accept that and click through that, and then it should start uploading.
All right. Well, I thought it did. Is there somewhere else that I need to go to show that?
No, it should. It should work. You know what you could also try, Chris, is just sharing your screen, which is, are you in a Windows?
Yeah, I am.
Do Control-Alt-D at the same time. Oh, something's happening.
Well, I just shared screen, so I'm going to And let's see here.
There we go.
So you're seeing essentially my, let's see, Cisco, I don't need to do that, right? Can you see my screen now? I can just go into, okay.
We sure can.
Oh, good. Let's see if we can get in here. All right, let's do this. Okay,
Beautiful.
so, yeah, great. Sorry about that, everybody. So this is our logo, Travelers Against Plastic, and it's not a standalone nonprofit, by the way. It's just our campaign. But we have a standalone website that people can go to, and they can pledge. It's free. You don't need to sign up or anything. It just says, hey, I'm going to do my best to eliminate the use of plastic water bottles. Organizations and operators can sign on as well, and then we'll send them everything they need to get their clients on board. So our vision is pretty simple: catalyze a self-sustaining global movement resulting in the near elimination of travelers' dependence on plastic water bottles. You know, I do say near because there are times when you got to buy a bottle of water. That's just all there is to it. So I think it's about aiming in the right direction. Why is it a problem? Well, we just had an incredible amount of tourist travel in 2014. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. 51 more million than in 2013, so we're increasing about 4.7% a year. If each tourist uses just 3 bottles a day, the total use is 3 billion bottles a day. That's a billion, and that's per day worldwide. Incredible use. So it's harmful to the environment. As you all know, oils or plastic is made from oils, and we need 24 million gallons to produce just a billion plastic bottles, so we need 3 times that. And of course, one bottle, shoot, it won't compost for at least 700 years. About 90% of the plastic in the ocean is from, or trash in the ocean is from plastics. And what's happening is this stuff is breaking down and then getting caught into these things called gyres in the world. Every major ocean has its own gyre. The Pacific gyre is called the Great Garbage Patch, is twice the size of Texas. And there is, in places in that gyre, the plastic outweighs plankton by a ratio of 6 to 1. You might not see it from the outside because it's small and it's broken down. It causes tremendous amounts of pressure on the wildlife because, of course, they're eating things that they think are animals. Roughly 44% of all seabirds, 22% of cetaceans, and all species of sea turtles and many species of fish have been documented with plastic in or wrapped around their bodies. Sea life just can't distinguish plastic from food. They're ingesting the debris, and it blocks their digestive tracts, and then, of course, they starve to death. There's an amazing documentary called Midway being made about this. It's tragic. A lot of people say to me, hey, Crystal, why don't we just recycle? Well, great. Yeah, we should. That's the minimum. But in the United States, at least, only about 20% of our bottles are recycled. And, of course, recycling takes energy as well. So, as Erik pointed out so well, reducing beforehand, making better choices beforehand really is the key. You know, a lot of people don't talk about the cost either, but it's astronomical. I mean, people are paying 2,000 times the price for water than tap water, right? Bottled water versus tap. It's essentially more than the cost of gasoline that we're paying for water, a product that really is virtually free. And the big one, I think, is health. Dr. Gina Solomon, she's a senior scientist at the Natural Resource Defense Council, told the New York Times there's absolutely no reason to believe that bottled water is safer than tap water. And a recent study from Germany came out, and they found 25,000 chemicals lurking in a single bottle. They tested the tap water of the same area for comparison, and it showed no activity on either form of receptor. Antinomide, that's actually one of those chemicals found in PET bottles, and they recognize in small doses it can cause dizziness and depression, and this is increased by storage in heated areas. You know, the thing is, most people, when they are traveling and they reach for that beautiful chilled bottle of plastic, water, and they think, oh, wow, this just looks so refreshed, it's so clean, I can trust it, but they have no idea where that bottle was before they grabbed it. You know, it's in the storage, or in the unit, nice and chilled, in the refrigerator or an ice bucket, but it could have been sitting in a warehouse for 2 weeks at 140 degrees, just leaching chemicals. I honestly think bottled water is not as safe. So I really feel like as travel industry organizations and operators and lodges, we really have a choice about which way we go and how we encourage people to move forward. So solution really, to me, is simple. I've been doing this for 16 years. I can honestly say I think I bought one bottle of water in the last 16 years that was plastic. I always travel prepared to clean my own. Operators and lodges can offer refillable containers for their clients so that they can fill up from there, and just let them know, hey, bring your own bottle because we're going to have water for you. How do you clean your water? Pretty simple. There's 3 methods, really: electronic, chemical, and mechanical. Electronic, this is the one I use the most. We have something called a SteriPEN. It's super small. You just stick it in your bottle of water, the light comes on, agitate the water for 90 seconds, and it's clean. This is what I've been using for the last decade. I've never been sick. I've cleaned water from wells in Nepal and drinking fountains in Nicaragua and villages in Kenya, and I've never been sick. It works great. One SteriPEN can clean 8,000 bottles of water, so it brings the cost of a bottle of water down to about 0.001 cents. A good old standby, just potable agua tablets. It's chemical treating. Just drop it in and wait 3 minutes, and the water's clean. And of course, there's mechanical things where you can actually push the water through a filtration or purification system. First need something I use a lot out in the field. There's a new product out called Grail, a company out here in Seattle, and it works like a coffee press. You just pull those 2 tubes that you can see apart, fill up the water, and then push it back down, and the water comes into the middle, just like a coffee press. Very easy, very useful. I think the big thing is just getting our clients on board, letting them know it is safe and that it is better and it is cheaper. And so it's really, for me, it's about education. And that's what the Travelers Against Plastic's all about, is really getting people on board with that. We really do hope that eventually what you'll see around the world is not people buying and disposing plastic water bottles, but carrying their own and finding out ways to fill it up, and for the hotels and places that people are visiting to offer water to be filled. Just like Erik showed, in the airports, I'm always pleased when I see those water filling stations, and I see them more and more. I just got back from Nepal recently, and the hotel that I've been going to for years just started providing bottled water, or not bottled water, but a large container of water on every landing so that people can fill up and they can avoid plastic water bottles. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but we just need to encourage people to do that. We've been partnering with a lot of organizations, and our partnership with World Food Travel Association is just going to be one of them, to try and spread that word with other like-minded organizations and get people on board. You can always get a hold of me at chris@crookedtrails.org. I encourage you to hit the Travelers Against Plastic website, sign the pledge, share the information. We have some incredible water bottles, too, that people can order. They're really beautiful. So thanks for your time. And, Erik, I'll pass it back over to you unless there's any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to open the floor to questions. So when people, if you have any questions, just go ahead and write them in the lower right-hand corner there. But I think Chris was a little understated when she was talking about her website, Travelers Against Plastic. When I was doing research for this presentation a few months ago, I delivered it to another event, and I came across Travelers Against Plastic, and I thought it was great, so I signed the pledge, but I wanted to do more. So I reached out to Chris, and I said, hey, we're in a position to be able to do more, to really support your effort, and, we want to walk the walk, so to speak, as we say in English. We want to put our money where our mouth is, as we also say in English. And so we forged that partnership because we know that we are in a unique position to be able to affect change, really. So I would encourage you to have a look at that Travelers Against Plastic website and take the pledge, and then you can get the logo to put on your website and spread that word as well. Now, we have a first question that came in, and it is, how do we get politicians involved in this? And Chris, that came in while you were speaking, so I think it might be targeted more to you.
Yeah, I just saw that come in. it takes a lot of effort, obviously, making change on the political level. But when you realize that in order for a city to sign an ordinance that says they can no longer sell plastic water bottles, well, that's political. And so I think, there's many different ways for people to get involved. One is education. That tends to be my effort, but a lot of people do go the political route. And it's a matter, at least in the United States, I don't know about Europe, but here it's a matter of contacting our representatives, which we can do easily. That's something that's set up for us to do and that we're encouraged to do. And once you can get some politician, any politician on board, understanding, then it's a matter of getting together what do you call them, Eric, when you people sign the petitions to get something on the
ballot.
Yeah, ballot. Get a ballot measure. So I don't know how you guys do it out there, but we eventually get a ballot measure going, and then little by little it moves. Sometimes you have other organizations. There's one called Think Outside the Bottle in the United States. They're really against plastic water bottles. And they have been working hard with our National Park Service. So I think it was Grand Canyon last year outlawed the sale of plastic water bottles. And I've been pushing for Mount Rainier to do the same thing. And so getting little by little, if we can get some of these large organizations, then other people can jump on board. But for us, it's a series of steps, if you will. But the ballot measure is definitely one of them.
It is. There's a comment here that in Europe there are regulations for sustainability and responsibility. I think that in some jurisdictions it's a little harder to push initiatives like this through. Usually it's in destinations or governments that are more traditional, and the status quo is fine, and they can't, see the benefit of doing something differently, maybe, or maybe there's a cost associated with it, or maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. But I think that actions speak louder than words, and when people start gathering and complaining, or even not rioting, but protesting, that kind of thing, that's when people start to pay attention and disrupting traffic patterns. And then there's a question about street food, and I think that this is a really good question, because it is an inherently takeout situation. It's not in a restaurant. You're usually served on china with glasses and metal silverware. Street food is usually a takeout container, a plastic container, or sometimes a biodegradable container, but it's almost always something that's throwaway. And you raise a very good point, Paulo. I think it's something that needs to be looked at. This notion of what food is put in a street food context is something that is governed by the health departments of different jurisdictions. So in some places it might be okay to use one kind of plastic container, in other places it might not be. It gets very complicated very quickly. And, I have not seen any kind of organizations that are working towards limiting that amount of takeout waste. There's the Green Restaurant Association, which I think is something that is trying to do that from a restaurant perspective, but that's also, I think, just a U.S.-based association. Here's a question. What countries are leading the charge in terms of eliminating plastic? Where can we look for positive examples to inspire us? Chris, do you have any perspective on that?
Well, obviously living in the United States, I know more about what's going on here, and there's a huge effort. And it's a collaboration of a number of different nonprofits and campaigns that are working together. So it's huge here. I think it needs to be, because we probably have the biggest problem. I mean, you see, waste around the world, but I think hands down, by far, the greatest is here in the United States. And so I think that's one reason that the charge of eliminating plastics here and that effort is so big. I might say, just as far as street food goes, I notice a lot of other countries that have used different techniques. So, you go to Thailand, for example, and you're eating street food, what they put it in is very small. You get some little pad thai. It's a compostable, small little thing with wooden chopsticks, and if you get a drink, it's in a little tiny plastic bag, not a huge cup. And so as far as street food goes, there's ways to do it that are less. I mean, we're never going to be able to completely eliminate that. But I think that you can see examples around the world of people doing it more responsibly, getting food wrapped up in green leaves, for example, when you're taking it. I've had that in a number of countries that I've gone to. So I'm always inspired when I see efforts of changing the material that we're getting the food in.
That's true. Our falafel wrapped in brown paper as opposed to a whole takeout container.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're not going to be able to get rid of it completely.
No, and I think that's part of the charm, too, of experiencing a new destination is that food. But, again, that's the conversation where, if you're handed a falafel sandwich in this huge, complex plastic clamshell, maybe you need to look at the shop owner and say, did you need to put it this? Man, that might cause some raised eyebrows, but I don't know.
I just wanted to touch on one thing, too, when somebody had said, we've got a lot of regulations on sustainability in Europe, but what about the major destinations? And I just wanted to say briefly that the major destinations are serving a lot of the Europeans and Americans and Australians and the travelers. And so if we request it, they're going to meet it. They want to serve, and they want to meet our expectations. And so as an operator, I let my, operators in other countries know, the partners I work with, listen, my people are coming prepared to clean their own water, and I expect that you're going to help them find water and that you're not going to offer them water bottles, and I don't want any water bottles, and I know that it's a sign of hospitality as soon as somebody arrives to offer them water. But what I want you to say to my clients is, I understand you're traveling prepared to clean your own water, and I want to know that that I respect that. I had one guy in Peru. We were trekking through the Andes, and he was a guide, and we passed a stream, and I told everybody, hey, this is a great place to fill up. And so everybody got their water bottles out and started filling up from the stream in Peru. And the guide's like, oh, my gosh, you cannot drink this water. You're going to get sick. Don't do that. We'll have water at the next thing. The next stop, and I said, no, we're prepared to clean this water, and everybody cleaned their water, and he just stood there with his mouth open, dumbfounded, and said, and I'll never forget it, on behalf of my country and Machu Picchu, I want to thank you. I've been a guide here for 15 years, and I've never seen anybody take the time to clean their own water. It's an honor to meet you and guide you.
Wow.
It's a matter of us being the ones that take the responsibility to them and say, this is how we want to run our trips. This is how we do it, and you need to meet us there. It's going to be better for you anyway.
That's a great example. Here's a question that was sent to me privately. It says, could genetically modified edibles help to deal with the massive waste of food, especially in the production and distribution stages? I think the GMO topic is really a thorny topic to talk about. There's a lot of pros and cons about GMO food, and I prefer not to get into that. I'm not an expert on GMO food. All I know is that it's something that I don't want to purchase personally. I have concerns about its safety, and anyway, let's leave it at that. I'm not an expert on GMO, so thank you for asking the question, but I don't think I'm the right person to answer that. Another question, why do you think so many people view sustainable practices as being more expensive or something only that hipsters do? Chris, you might have a perspective, but I think from our perspective, what I would say is that it started off being more expensive. It was something that was extremely rare to find, therefore the price was very expensive, and there was perhaps a stigma attached with it in the past too, because it wasn't really needed before. So, you're kind of a wacko because you're recycling all this stuff and you're a weirdo. I mean, you want to get the looks that I still get today sometimes when I ask questions about recycling. People look at me like I'm crazy. They really do. I don't know, Chris, what do you think there's any other reasons why people might view it as more expensive?
It's interesting. I mean, in some respects, up front, at least with what I'm looking at, it is. A purchase of a SteriPEN is $100. Over the course of its life, it brings the plastic water bottle down, as I mentioned, to 0.001 cents. So in reality, it's much cheaper. But I think a great deal of the problem is nobody thinks about external costs. So they just look at, well, this is the cost of doing a reusable thing, and this is a disposable, and disposable is cheaper. But it's because we never put the total cost of disposing and dealing with the pollution that creates these kinds of products in on the cost of the disposable one. And that's always been a problem. And I'm hoping that eventually people will start to come to realize that that plastic water bottle is not 89 cents. If you tallied all of the cost of the environment, it's probably $10. And it's a way of looking at things that we need to change for sure. Most of the hipsters, if you will, tend to educate themselves. And so they're willing to understand and make the right choice.
Excellent. Well, I think with that last question, we'll wrap it up. I'd like to thank our special guest, Chris McKay, for joining us from Crooked Trails and her Travelers Against Plastic campaign. I think you really added a lot of value to the talk today. And I would like to thank all of our delegates for attending the fourth in our series of presentations for the Online Food Travel Summit. This is the last presentation for today, Thursday, April 9, 2015, and we will resume tomorrow with 4 new sessions tomorrow morning. So thank you all for attending, and you will be receiving a link to a recording of this session by the end of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Erik. Have a good day.
Nice job, Erik.
Thank you.